Harvard University will no longer publicly speak out on political or social issues that don't impact Harvard's, quote, core function. This decision follows the footsteps of University of Chicago and comes on the heels of months of protests that have ignited an identity crisis for elite universities. In a statement to the Harvard community, the university wrote, quote, "In particular, the report concludes that the university and its leaders should not issue official statements about public matters that do not directly affect the university's core function as an academic institution. It reasons that when the university speaks officially on matters outside its institutional area of expertise, such statements risk compromising the integrity and credibility of our academic mission and may undermine open inquiry and academic freedom by making it more difficult for some members of the community to express their views when they differ from the university's official position." Harvard formed a faculty-led institutional voice working group after months of polarizing sentiments on the Israel-Hamas war.
The new policy will apply to all university administrators and governing board members, deans, departments, chairs, and faculty councils. Now, this also follows from the eventual resignation of former Harvard President Claudine Gay, who came out with other Harvard leaders 2 days after the Hamas attacks in Israel with a statement that many Israel supporters said did not acknowledge the barbarity of the attacks on Israelis. And after botched hearings on the Hill, Gay did in fact resign following plagiarism accusations as well. Now, interim President Alan Garber, his announcement here is part of a broader effort to guide Harvard out of crisis and protect the school against the type of attacks that it faced last fall. Garber also established the working group to root out anti-Semitism and anti-Arab and anti-Muslim bias on campus. Free speech advocates are hailing the decision to have the university not make official political statements anymore. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression wrote, quote, "In big win for free speech, Harvard won't issue statements on hot-button social and political issues." Heterodox Academy, a collaborative of educators, wrote, quote, "Bravo to Harvard for adopting statement neutrality, a step forward to embracing viewpoint diversity on campuses and creating a campus climate that does not chill speech." I also think this is a great decision. All universities should do this. This is the easiest thing in the world educational institutions can do to get themselves out of scrutiny, out of making people on both sides or all sides of political issues mad. There is no reason for them to weigh in, because they'll weigh in and then someone will say, why are you weighing on this but not weighing in on this? Or this statement is toothless. And obviously, like, statements from institutions tend to be kind of toothless. So you're not even going to make happy, like on Israel-Palestine, if you put out a statement condemning the attacks on October 7th, you're not going to make Israelis happy enough, and you might anger Palestinians. If they put out a statement condemning what's going on in Gaza now, they might make Israel people unhappy. They're not going to make people concerned about what's happening in Gaza happy enough. You just can't win, so you should just not do it. Adopt a position of, why do we have to say anything about this? Leave your statements to, like, congratulating the university's sports team for winning, or like celebrating its merit scholars or whatever.
Yeah, I think the assumption that it's possible to make a neutral statement on a political issue is ridiculous, because the politics of today are not the same politics of 20 years ago, where we all agree that we have this foreign policy issue of you have, Israel creating settlements, pushing Palestinians out of the land they've lived on for many, many years, or you have Russia invading Ukraine. These are things that, you're taking a moral stance on. It's not a matter of policy of, like, how much weapons do we send? It's, should we be sending weapons at all? And even internally, it's up for debate whether or not we should address the housing crisis. It's not which policies do we put into effect to ensure that affordable housing is accessible. And so at a time when politics is a debate of morals, it becomes very difficult to make any statement. But are the administrators of a university even equipped to make a political statement at all? These are not people who are regularly dealing with politics. These are people who are running a college, right? So I don't think we should expect them to even be able to come up with a statement.
Well, no one's calling on them to make statements. Like, when Russia invades Ukraine, no one is saying,
Harvard,
when will Harvard say we condemn in the starkest moral terms the unjust invasion of? Why? Why do you have to say anything about it? There's no reason to. There's no reason to. And like at any time on Earth, there is any number of unjust things happening. There are civil wars happening in Africa that we don't talk about. In South America, the people of North Korea are suffering. The people of China are suffering. You don't need to. You can't and don't need to weigh in on every issue. So maybe just, if you're not a political facing organization, maybe just don't.
Absolutely.
You just don't have to say anything. So I think, yes, free speech organizations have wanted this move for a long time. The University of Chicago has modeled this kind of behavior that, the institution doesn't need to say anything. Also, there's a concern that if the institution is saying something, then some people will say, well, what if I have a different opinion? Is my right, are you going to recognize my right as a student or a professor to weigh in my personal capacity and to contradict the institution? And then the institution says, well, we have free speech, or we recognize free speech policies. That's part of our handbook for students and professors, but it risks muddying the waters or confusing people about whether they do have that right to dissent.
And I think this goes hand in hand with the treatment of protesters and anyone making political statements on campus. A university to say, your statements or your actions go against our university's values. A student should never find themselves in that position for expressing ideas on campus. Yeah. I firmly believe that, whether you're on the far right, the far left, anywhere in between or outside of that. A university should be a place where, you can form think tanks within Harvard that put out their statements and their opinions, and it's a group of scholars and students that are producing, the materials, the thoughts. But Harvard University is not a think tank. It's a university with many different schools within it, and many different schools of thought within those schools. And so I think to be representative of that, you have to say nothing at all, because coming out with a statement that you think is neutral, you're going to alienate one person or another. Yeah. They should be places to learn about all perspectives, not places that have to stick to a strict set of core values, which typically represent the university's biggest investors.
Yes. And I'm glad that they're finally learning this lesson. It's long overdue. I wonder if other institutions will follow Harvard in this and just say, and they're going to save themselves headaches, because they're getting yelled at all the time. The leaders of Harvard and other elite campuses keep getting dragged before Congress to answer for things students and faculty and protesters are doing and saying. And it's been a lot of Republicans, yelling at them for allegedly allowing anti-Semitism on campus, and they did not handle those hearings particularly well. But it is, even though I'm not largely sympathetic to the people who run elite universities, because I think they have a lot of terrible policies, including on speech. I felt somewhat bad for them there in some cases, because they were trying to be like, well, you might think that speech is anti-Semitic, that speech might genuinely be anti-Semitic, but unless it's targeted at a specific individual in a way that's creating a hostile educational environment, these are all terms that have been litigated, and there's law surrounding when the institution has to weigh in, or where an employer would have to weigh in those kinds of contexts. It remains the case that just people saying really hateful, really awful things, we do in fact protect that broadly, unless it becomes targeted or severe or pervasive or satisfies all these criteria. And the members of Congress were just not satisfied with that explanation at all, even though it just is the law.
Right. And that's not to say that Harvard is suddenly this bastion of free thought. Of course not. They make a political decision every time they choose faculty to hire in various departments. When you're hiring faculty for the Harvard Kennedy School, that's absolutely a political decision, because all of those professors have had careers where they've made political statements. They've taken sides on major issues. So to assume that in making everyday decisions, these administrators are not political, it's not fully correct. But should they be making political statements? No. Mm-hmm. And I think, yes, it's a private institution. Sure, they can do whatever they want. They can stand for whatever they want. But I think this decision was also, in part, they didn't want to alienate incoming classes, because students are their market, and young people are very pro-Palestine. So to see the university take this hardline stance could cost them some incoming students. And so I think that's interesting as well, the power of that market of young people.
Yeah, I would like to see them strengthen their free speech policies, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Expression, which we cited here, I think has ranked them it's like last or second to last of all the colleges they rank on free speech policies. Like they are one of the more censorship-inclined elite universities. So I was not very sympathetic to Claudine Gay when she got ousted, and Brianna and I ended up fighting about it a lot. I'm sorry, she has presided over an institution that is objectively failing, according to a watchdog organization that monitors these things, that does not have speech-affirming policies whatsoever. So I think a change of leadership was appropriate, given that case. That does it for us for today. Tomorrow on Rising, Jessica will be here, I believe.
I'll be back with, I believe, Amber,
yes,
our usual Rising Friday.
That's right. That's what's happening. So thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Have a good one.
Bye, y'all.